So yeah, we are walking along US Highway 90, which is Government Street here in Mobile. And just up ahead of us, about a block ahead, is kind of an engineering marvel. When it is an underground tunnel that goes underneath the Mobile River and out into Mobile Bay. It's called the Bankhead Tunnel, and it was built in a shipyard nearby. We're going to cross the street right here. So yeah, it's a little hard. You can see where the cars are dropping down. We'll get a little closer later on the tour. But yeah, so we're going to cross the street right now, Chris, safely. Sure. This is the only street in downtown Mobile where I worry about my guests when I'm doing my walking tour, because this is a really fast road, and sometimes it's difficult to get a large group across in one light cycle because the walk light is kind of short. Mm-hmm. All right.
We had someone comment before saying they didn't feel like there was much traffic at all, which I agreed with.
Right.
But this feels like this is the thoroughfare. This is how you get around.
It is.
Trying to make some distance.
That's right. And if you were here on if you happen to be here on Government Street in the late morning, in the summer, you would probably see a long line of traffic backing up to get through that tunnel. That would be headed for the beaches over in Gulf Shores, which is also part of Alabama, or a little farther over to Pensacola. Once you get through the tunnel, you can get on I-10 and just continue to head east from there. Mm-hmm. This beautiful historic downtown street. And you know, Mobile is a real mix of the modern and the historical. For instance, if we stop right here, we can see the offices of Dr. Henry LeVert. And that goes all the way back to the 19th century, the early 19th century. But if we look just ahead, we see a high-rise building as well. So like a lot of downtowns, we kind of have a mix of things that are historical, things that are modern. And we're going to talk today about some facts and some stories from all three of the centuries of Mobile's history.
Awesome.
So thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Todd, by the way, of Secret History Tours.
That's him. Secret
History Tours. And so I'm doing a walking tour here in downtown Mobile for those of you that might just be tuning in on the live stream. And we're going to be walking around this beautiful coastal city, the oldest city in the state of Alabama, 318 years old. Founded by the French, colonized by the British, finally colonized by the Spanish before we became an American city. So we're going to walk right over this direction and get started. So where we are now, this big open space.
Shannon says hi again, Todd. She was with us last night.
Oh yeah, hi Shannon. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, guys, if you're here, you know, you can say hi to Todd as well. That lets him know that you're with us, and it wasn't just me that you were chatting with. You know, everyone likes a conversation.
Right, absolutely. So this open space is called Mardi Gras Park. This is one of the oldest parts of downtown. So if you're surprised that there's a big open space in a city well, that's because actually two different historical courthouses have been on this location. But we've kept it as an open green space for public events, and we also have these brightly colored statues that are all the way around the edges. And we'll take a look at this one right here. So again, welcome to Mobile, Alabama. Now, one of the things that we call ourselves is the port city. One of the things that we call ourselves is the original capital of French Louisiana, founded in 1702. And we also are known as the mother of mystics, or the birthplace of Mardi Gras and Carnival. So Mardi Gras, American-style Mardi Gras, really began in Mobile, Alabama in 1831 with a man named Michael Craft, who started the very first crew or mystic society called the Calbellion de Raken Society. And since that time, we've had dozens and dozens, probably hundreds actually, of mystic societies that have formed. Some of them have stuck around for a long time, like the Order of Myths that started in 1867, I believe, 67, and paraded in 1868. Some of them are nearly new. We have some organizations that are 15 or 20 years old or less, but many that are much older. We actually have the oldest mystic society in America that it goes all the way back, I believe, to 1842. That's located here in Mobile. All right, so a little bit about Mardi Gras and a little bit of background. If you've been to Mardi Gras in New Orleans, our younger sister, just down the interstate here, then you've probably seen floats, you've probably seen costumes. We share those things in common. We also have queens, like this queen that we just saw here. And as you can see, she's dark-skinned, she's African-American. She represents the African-American tradition of Mardi Gras here in Mobile under an organization called MAMGA, Mobile Area Mardi Gras Association. And just over here, we're going to see her king. So there are lots of kings and queens during Mardi Gras. Every organization usually has one. I think Americans are sort of in love with the idea of royalty, at least for a little while during Mardi Gras. And here we have our MAMGA king. So this is King Alexis I. Each year there's a new king that's chosen by the Mardi Gras organizations. These are private organizations, and they self-fund usually a ball and a very expansive parade that usually goes through the downtown part of the city. And if you've ever been to a Mardi Gras parade, you know that if you're standing on the sidelines, you are a participant. You're out there catching beads, you're catching moon pies, and lots of other things that get thrown from the floats. And it's important that you pay attention to your job, because if you don't keep those hands up, sometimes you can get a face full of beads that might even leave some bruises or some marks.
What's a moon pie, if I can ask?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a moon pie is a little round snack cake, almost like a Little Debbie, and they're really popular in Mobile. They get thrown from Mardi Gras floats all the time. And in fact, if we step right over this way, you can see the largest moon pie off in the distance at the top of the Trustmark building over there. That big square 1960s high-rise just on the right-hand corner has a giant moon pie.
You guys might not be able to see it, but I'm going to try to zoom in for you.
Yeah. And we drop that moon pie on New Year's Eve every year.
Oh, it's your moon pie ball.
Right, exactly, exactly.
It's, let me see if I can.
Yeah. And moon pies actually aren't from Alabama. They're made in Tennessee, but they've become really popular here because of Mardi Gras. They're aerodynamic. That's one of their most important properties.
Got it.
Yeah. All right, so continuing to talk a little bit about Mardi Gras, we have this musician statue here. The trumpeter here represents the rich history of music on the Gulf Coast, and particularly the music of Carnival and Mardi Gras. In fact, he represents a specific band here in Mobile that leads almost every Mardi Gras parade. They're called the Excelsior Band, and they're an all-brass men's band, and they march in front of the parade, and they play New Orleans style and Mardi Gras style music, and we're very proud of them. Historically, they started at a fire hall that actually still stands. It's not on our tour today because it's on the western side of downtown, but the band was created by Creoles of color. So the Creoles of color would be a mix between African and European, typically, either Spanish or French. And so,
because I got you in the shadows.
right, okay, there we go. Now I'm in the sun. Yeah, awesome.
My screen's a little bit bright, so I'm trying to, like, at the same time. But
Sure.
it's perfect.
Okay.
Just so, not to interrupt you, but since I already interrupted you,
Right.
it's worth saying really quick. Emma Duren says hello from Tennessee.
Was that Irma?
Irma. Sorry.
Irma, that's
from
my aunt.
Waynesboro,
Hi, Irma.
Waynesboro, Tennessee.
That's awesome.
And my cousin, Colleen, says, what a beautiful day for a tour.
It is a beautiful day.
Kristen and Shannon point out that there was a little weird circle there. I know what that is, guys. That's the gimbal accidentally getting caught in the camera because I didn't move the camera far enough over to the left.
Okay.
And I've resolved it now.
All right.
And Michaela asks, did you have a Mardi Gras parade this year?
We did not, Michaela. That's a great question. Just like New Orleans, we canceled all parade permits here in Mobile to avoid crowds and to try to minimize the spread of COVID. but we're hoping that, and we're planning on parades next year. We also have planned a small parade for May once our statewide masking ordinance is over. It won't be quite on the scale that our typical Mardi Gras is, because our Mardi Gras parade season lasts 2.5 weeks. We have more than 30 different parades that happen on different days and nights of the week, and we have even more organizations than that hold balls, and these are white tie affairs by invitation only. But yeah, thank you for that great question. There were no balls and there were no parades this year because of COVID. And historically, that's a really big deal, because there's only been 2 other things that have stopped, 3 other things that have stopped Mardi Gras in Mobile. Can you guess what they might have been?
Wars?
Yes, wars. The Civil War, World War I, and World War II were the only times that Mardi Gras parades have been canceled.
Michaela, who lives in Cologne, Cologne is very, very famous for their own sort of Mardi Gras.
Okay.
Which they call, if I believe it, I think it's called Fasching.
All right.
Is what they call it there. And they throw candy, people dress up in costumes.
Right.
The men and the women leave their wedding rings at home that day. The men wear ties and women bring scissors to cut them.
Oh yes, I've heard about the famous necktie cutting on that day. Yeah, so these kind of traditions are part of Carnival worldwide. A big and important part of Carnival is just a celebration of excess. Drink too much, you eat too much, you kiss too many people, maybe even the wrong people, and it's all a celebration that leads up to Lent. So traditionally, especially for Catholics, Lent is a time when you think about your own mortality, you think about maybe mistakes and sins you've made over the past year, and often people give up something like eating meat or consuming alcohol. So you might think of Carnival as a last blowout before you have to go into that sort of dark period of Lent. So as we're walking around here in Mardi Gras Park, we're going to walk over this way, talk a little bit more. So Mobile, as I mentioned before, was founded originally by French Catholics. And in fact, Peter Lemoyne d'Iberville and Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne Bienville were 2 brothers who founded Mobile as the original capital of French Louisiana in 1702. And so you'll see influences of French culture throughout our city, including simple things like the names of streets. So the street that we're walking down now is called Royal Street. Now, if you visit New Orleans, as Chris is going to do tomorrow, right, Chris?
Tonight.
Tonight.
Yeah, like as soon as we're done in the car, and I'm heading towards none other than to New Orleans to meet up with Chef Jason Goodenough.
Oh,
for
great,
a food mukbangy style tour. So.
Oh, that sounds terrific. So you'll be passing through all 3 original capitals of French Louisiana, because Biloxi was actually the first. Well, it depends on how you count it. It didn't quite last for a full year, so some people count Mobile as the original capital. But Biloxi was one of the capitals, Mobile was, and then finally, once New Orleans was founded in 1718, then that was the final capital of French Louisiana. So we're standing in front of a figure that looks like a court jester or a clown. We call these characters Follies here in Mobile, and of course they represent all of the fun and all of the insanity of Carnival and Mardi Gras. So we're going to walk over this way a little bit more.
Liliana reaches out and asks, es solo en inglés, our tour together. And Liliana, lo siento, pero yeah, en este momento no tenemos más tours en castellano, porque todas las personas no dinero. Basically.
Don't understand.
Yeah, we have a large Spanish audience.
Right.
And we were doing a lot of Spanish language tours for a while.
I see.
But unfortunately, the Spanish audience was very happy to watch tours, but not really help support them financially.
I see.
And the guide said, we're just not going to do them anymore.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
C'est la vie.
Yes. Well.
Yeah. Anyway, but we do it in English. Thanks.
Terrific. Yeah, sure. So I want to introduce you to a historical character. Is both a real person and sort of a mythical character. His name is Chief Slacabamorinico, or Joe Cain. He actually, Yes, so this is Joe Cain. So Joe Cain is a character who has his own holiday within the carnival tradition here in Mobile. It's always the Sunday before Fat Tuesday. Now the story behind this is that after the Civil War, he was a real resident of Mobile. In fact, he was a clerk at the Southern Market, which is just across the street. And Mardi Gras had been canceled for the duration of the Civil War until in 1867, Joseph Stilwell Cain was part of a volunteer fire company that was invited to be in a parade in New Orleans. Now keep in mind that New Orleans had created mystic societies with the help of Mobile way back in the well, ours goes back to 1831. I think theirs goes back to 1857. So when he went and visited in 1867, he saw that they had restarted their carnival tradition with parades, and when he returned to Mobile, he started planning a new parade. So the Order of Myths was the mystic society that was created after that, and Joe Cain dressed in this costume that you see here and paraded or masked on Mardi Gras Day. So that was the restart of our carnival or Mardi Gras tradition after the Civil War. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So let's see, let's take a walk over this way and take a look at our Colonial fort.
And I'm sorry if for that. Thank you for being so able to, thank you very much, for being able to be so spontaneous in the bit for, yeah, I know that I've kind of screwed up the rhythm of your tour, but you have such an amazing wealth of knowledge that I really feel like I could drop you anywhere in this city.
Oh, hey, how are you all?
We're in a live stream right now if you guys want to.
So this is Chris Sandeman, and he's doing a live stream with us of the walking tour downtown.
Yeah,
and
if you go to YouTube, SANDEMANs Live, like the Sandman that makes you sleep at night with an E between the sand and the man. Sandman? But Sandeman. Yeah, if you've ever done a free walking tour in Europe, you might have been on one of ours. You've seen the red umbrella. Speaking of which, this is your red umbrella. You don't have to carry it right now. I can hold on to it.
Oh no, this is great. Thank you so much, Chris.
That is your official, that is your badge of honor. You've got your own Sandeman.
Love it. And you know, as hot as it gets down here on the humid, warm Gulf Coast, I'm going to need this when I start giving tours in June, July, and August.
Awesome.
This will give me a little bit of shade. Thank you so much.
Sorry that it says free tour all over it. It might not fit your model.
No, it's fine. It's great. Thank you so much. I have a little gift for you. As long as we're talking about Mardi Gras, I have from here in Mobile. Let me see if I can get these out of my pocket.
Oh, it's very kind.
Yeah, so these are commemorative coins that get tossed from Mardi Gras parade floats here in Mobile. So this one is from the organization that I just talked about, the Order of Myths, and on it you can see a Folly chasing a figure of death around a broken column.
So cool.
Yeah, so the double OMs, and then on the back side of the coin, it always shows the theme for that year's parade, which, let's see, this one is Pieces of the Truth, and I think that's from 2019, so
very cool.
There's one.
Thank you.
Sure, and here's a couple of others from other organizations, the Crew of Columbus and the Maids of Mirth, which is a 20th century organization that's all women. So there's lots of diversity in our Mardi Gras tradition. These are really collectible, so hope you enjoy those.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I feel like I might have just pulled an Arya Stark from Game of Thrones. And,
right.
If I have to get a ride somewhere, it looks like I've got my entrance coin.
There you go. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So let's step right over here and talk about this historic fort here. So, and it might be better to stand in the shade over here. So right in the middle of downtown Mobile, we have a reproduction of a colonial fort originally built by the French in the 1720s. And this was state-of-the-art for French military engineering in the 1720s. And in the reproduction here, it's built at a slightly smaller scale and only about half of the original fortification. So this was a star-shaped fort originally with battlements and it was protected by cannons, and you can see some of the structures that were inside. Now, today, the original fort stood from about 1720, the brick version of the fort. There was an even older wooden fort, and it stood from 1720 until about 1820. And in 1820, we were an American city, didn't need a fort anymore. There was no one really to defend against. So they tore down that original fort, used a lot of the bricks to fill in the waterfront area, and that was the end of that fort. But in 1976, the American Bicentennial, they rebuilt the smaller Reproduction here on the spot. And besides being kind of a historic museum space, it also had another important function. We were hiding something. We were hiding something here in Mobile, and that something was our second underground tunnel that the Interstate 10 goes through. So if we turn around, you can see a couple of interstate signs there, and you can hear the roar of traffic. So all the traffic that's going between Alabama and Florida right now on I-10 is actually, Chris, going beneath our feet.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so this Reproduction fort was built to kind of disguise the entrance to the tunnel.
Very cool.
And if we look across the street, across Royal Street here, we can see a big 1970s style kind of industrial building, and it has an important function. It runs pumps and fans that circulate air and keep the water from flooding the large tunnel that's just beneath us.
Got it. We have something like this in New York as well, where like the entrance to the secret headquarters of Men in Black,
okay, right,
is performing the same sort of aeration function,
right,
to breathe air down into the Battery Park Tunnel,
yeah,
which cuts over
okay,
towards Brooklyn. So,
sure,
yeah,
sure,
very cool.
Great, that's a great tie-in. And if we look, we can see two low-relief sculptures on this building. The one on the left would be an image of the Native Americans as they would have appeared when Europeans first came here. First the Spanish in the 16th century, and then later the French in the 18th century. So the particular tribe that's being depicted here is the Mauvillans or the Mobilans, which is actually where Mobile, the city, gets its name.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so as you can see, this male member of the tribe is wearing some shells around his calves. He's wearing kind of a breech cloth, a kind of crown with feathers, and he has a body tattoo, a tribal tattoo on his chest. And if you can't see it very clearly on the figure of the man, we have an enlarged version of it just beside him. So he has a tattoo of snakes, a hand, and an eye, and members of that tribe, as a rite of passage, would get that tattooed by hand using sharpened, I think it was sharpened bones and wood process to me.
Yeah, totally.
Now over on the right-hand side of the building, we can see the European founder of the city. This is Jean-Baptiste Le Moyne Bienville. He was a very young man, like college age, when this place was founded. And you can also see a small image of the fort next to him and the fleur-de-lis. And speaking of tattoos, of course the fleur-de-lis is an old symbol of French nobility. And I actually happen to have a tattoo myself of a fleur-de-lis.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Look.
Tattoo time. So there's my fleur-de-lis. Now, I got this because back after Hurricane Katrina, I took some students over to New Orleans, and we helped clean up after Hurricane Katrina.
Oh,
and
awesome.
yeah, it was a great trip where we could feel like we were part of this kind of national tragedy, and we were trying to help out in some small way. But it is a symbol both of New Orleans and of the French crown. And so Jean-Baptiste over here, he has a secret tattoo as well. It's not just a fleur-de-lis, and of course you can't see it in this particular sculpture, but because he wanted to really be a part and be as closely allied as possible with Native Americans, he was invited to their Native American tattooing ceremony. So we know from historical accounts that he had similar tattoos to the one that we saw here in the sculpture. So he had tribal tattoos of snakes all over his body. But now, when he was, received in court or when he was in mixed company. Of course, he wore his European clothing and you wouldn't see any of that. But when he rode into battle, one of the commitments of getting that tribal tattoo was that if members of the tribe were attacked, every person who wore that tattoo was required to come to their aid. So that was part of the alliance that he formed with that Native American tribe.
So cool. The French seem to be so much people in North America than the British or the Dutch or the Spanish.
Right, definitely. They had a very different attitude, and in fact, part of the reason why Mobile wasn't actually originally founded in this spot, as you pointed out earlier, it was 27 miles to the north, was so that they could live as closely as possible with the Native American tribes that were there. Yeah, they wanted to negotiate peace treaties with them. They wanted to be able to buy furs from them and that sort of thing.
Teague's just joined us, says, hi everyone, hi Todd and Chris. And in Quebec, the main French part of Canada, they use the fleur-de-lis a lot. Do you know the connection to Canada's history here?
Yes, I do, and I'm so glad you pointed that out, because those two brothers weren't actually from France. They weren't born in France. They were born in Quebec. So they were Quebecers that came down the Atlantic Ocean and brought a lot of French-Canadian soldiers with them, and they settled Mobile, Alabama. That's right. I'm so glad you pointed that out.
Was not to defend against native indigenous people. It was, I'm guessing, like against the British? Like is why the French would originally build a fort?
Right. Well, originally their competition on the Gulf Coast was actually the Spanish. Right. And the story behind that was that originally Mobile's, when they laid out the maps for the journey, they were aiming, using Spanish maps that had been created by early explorers, they were planning to go to what is now Pensacola Bay. But when they got there, the Spanish had beaten them by 6 months. And they didn't really have a fort built yet, but they had enough of a fort to kind of bluff the French and get rid of them. They had built maybe a wall and some fake cannons or something.
Okay.
And they said, guys, yeah, we've got a fort here, so you really can't settle here. You need to move on. And so that's what the French did. They moved on, and the very next bay over to the west from there would be Mobile Bay.
Fascinating. I feel like I don't know much about the French-Spanish conflict stuff, and it usually always felt like the British were the antagonists, you know, to both of them.
Right. Well, that was true. That was true. And the one time when the Spanish and the French would ally would be against the British. Yeah. But the British controlled most of the Atlantic coast, of course. That was what they had colonized. But down here on the Gulf Coast, it was a race between the French and the Spanish. Now, later on, the British come into the picture, because in 1763, after the French and Indian War, as we call it in the United States, and I think it's called the 7 Years' War by Europeans, at the end of that, that was a huge loss to the French. And the British basically won, and so they negotiated so that, let's see, the British...
Do you have a friend? Oh, yes, you do. Hi, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's the nemesis of every tour guide.
The cute dog.
There's nothing worse than the cute dog. And then the cute baby. Between the two of them.
Right,
you know,
right,
you
right.
Can't win.
Yeah.
Like, even me, I couldn't help myself. And I could have ignored the dog, but I couldn't.
Could not look at it, right? Yeah. So anyway, yeah, no, that's okay. So the British came along in 1763. They took Mobile, not by military force, but because of the force of a treaty at the end of this international war. And so they actually then took all the French holdings along the Gulf Coast, except, and this is an important exception, New Orleans. New Orleans was the prize of the French crown, and so they were able to hang on to it through that period. But later on, the Spanish come along in 1780 and kick the British out and managed to take both New Orleans, let me see if this is right. Yeah, the Spanish took New Orleans, it became a Spanish city, and the rest of the Gulf Coast as well. And they unified all of their holdings from Florida over, and that was called, we were called Spanish West Florida during that period of time. Yeah.
That's
all right.
Really interesting. Bill Reynolds in Beaufort taught us that actually back in the old day, the original capital of La Florida was Beaufort in South Carolina.
Oh, you know, I didn't know that. Yeah. That's really interesting.
I'm learning so much on these trips that I'm
right.
able, and you can see just how connected history is everywhere.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, And you know, a lot of Americans, including me, when you're in grade school, you learn this very simplified version of American history, where the enemy, the colonizer, is always the British, and the patriots are always warmly received, and it all ends in 1776, and everybody lives happily ever after. It didn't really work that way.
Definitely not.
Particularly here on the Gulf Coast, because Mobile happened to be a Tory stronghold. We talked about this last night. It was very pro-British. It was actually being held by the British at the time, so it made a lot of sense. There was an American patriot that was circulating an early copy of this seditious document you might have heard of, the American Declaration of Independence. He was caught in Mobile and put in jail. So that's how pro-British and anti-American they were here.
Are we going to see another of the kind of the flag combos that we can see up against the wall here, or?
This is a great place to take a look at the flags. Let's see.
These are actually the bigger, bigger versions.
Yeah, these look great.
We only have 1, 2, 3, 5 of them.
That's right. We don't have all 6, and we're probably not going to find 2 flags for obvious reasons. One would be the Confederate flag. It's no longer flown, generally speaking, and the other one would be the flag of secession that Alabama flew. It became its own country for a little while.
Those aren't them there. Is it on that?
They are. We could walk in through the gate and take a look at those.
We?
Yeah, sure. So this is the Conde Charlotte Museum. This is actually the oldest standing structure in the city of Mobile.
Wow.
It was originally, before it was remodeled in the 19th century into this beautiful home, this was originally the jail. This was the jail of the colonial history, and it was originally completely enclosed by the walls of the original fort. So this is the smaller reproduction of the fort over here. The original size, to give you a sense of the scale, was 2 or 3 times as big as what you see. So the original walls would have gone all the way around where we're standing now, and this was the jail.
And this was inside of it, yeah.
Right. So Chris was asking about something we talked about last night, and that's the 6 flags that have flown over Mobile. And if we take a look at these big colorful ones up on the 2nd story of the house here, of course you see the historic French flag, not the modern tricolor, but the royal flag, and it has the 3 fleur-de-lis in gold on a white field. So that's our original colonizer, the French. The next one in line would be the British Union Jack.
Union flag.
Union flag,
It's only
okay.
a jack when it's flown from a ship.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
It's one of those tour guide trivia.
Okay, good to know, good to know. Now,
everyone says Union Jack still, or else people don't know what you're talking about.
Right,
It's,
sure.
Yeah.
So then it's a little difficult to see, but we also have the Spanish flag up there. It's wrapped around the pole, and it's it's a red, white, and gold color.
Yeah.
And the 2 flags that you don't see up there, because they're not generally allowed to be flown anymore, they still do exist on this historic city seal. And this is a city seal that includes the original. I'm going to use my Sandeman's umbrella as a pointer. So this would be, of course, the French flag, the British flag, the Spanish flag. And then in historical order, we have, well, the American flag would have come next. And then when Alabama seceded in 1860, this was the flag that they used. This was the Republic of Alabama flag, sometimes called the secession flag. The Confederacy didn't exist yet as a political body, so Alabama became its own country for less than a year. Then we have one of several different Confederate flags, not the battle flag, but this is, and if someone who's a Civil War historian will be able to tell us exactly the name of this particular flag, but this is a Confederate flag, and then, of course, finally, the American flag. 6 different flags that have flown over the city. So this house was originally, the structure was originally built as a jail in 1822. It was remodeled in 1845 as this beautiful historical home that you see. And we're going to continue walking.
Great, thanks for the quick detour.
Yeah, sure, no problem. We also have cannons lying about here in Mobile. A lot of them are left from the Civil War. The city of Mobile was highly fortified all the way through the war, and we talked about that on our ghost tour last night.
Teague, not to ignore you, Teague, I saw your comment come in, but I didn't want to interrupt. Teague asks, can we talk about food?
Absolutely.
You guys have incredible food there, right? Do you have a top 2 or 3 local foods that kind of embody Mobile and that that you enjoy, that that are Mobilian?
That's a great question. Thank you, Teague. I love to talk about food. Who doesn't, right? And here in Mobile, we do have lots of dishes. Of course, seafood is really big since we're a coastal city. Fresh oysters are really popular as well. And we have a few other foods that have been popular. There's something called West Indian salad, and it is made with, I think, squid and crab. But your viewers might need to Google the recipe for that. It's called West Indies salad.
Could someone check what the ingredients in West Indies salad is for us and let us know, please?
A lot of our foods we have in common with New Orleans. So shrimp and grits is big here, shrimp etouffee. We also get fresh crawfish. And so crawfish season is coming up really soon. If we're not already into it, I'm not sure. Now we're walking down this beautiful historic street. This is St. Emmanuel Street in a little district here that's been cut off by the interstate. So this is a 2 square block little neighborhood that's actually mostly owned by a hotel developer, and we have this beautiful historic inn and several other structures around it. As you can see, they're preparing for what looks like a wedding.
I'm going to say wedding.
Yeah, and they're able to have this in the street because technically the street isn't public because it doesn't have through access to the rest of the city. So what's nice about that for guests is that they can set up a tent and they can have a reception literally out in the middle of the street.
I mean, there's a Fauci moment here for me.
Right.
Which is it not too soon?
Oh, right.
You know?
Right. So
But,
that's a good
yeah.
that's a good question.
Not to throw shade on someone's nuptials.
Right, absolutely.
You don't want to invite the grandparents if they're not going to make it to to the paper anniversary.
Right. Well, some grandparents, of course, now have been vaccinated. Hi, how are you all?
Beautiful.
Yeah, this looks
You guys
great.
did an amazing job.
Yeah. So my
Sorry.
yeah, that's
Not
okay.
for this stuff, right?
No, absolutely. So we're actually in front of historic Fort Conde Inn. This was originally a single family house built in 1836. It's beautiful, it's amazing. It's just in front of us here. We're going to walk around the corner and give you a side view of that as well. So this is now a historic inn here in Mobile, Alabama. And if you stay here, you actually get your own little preservation neighborhood that's 2 square blocks. That's basically your front yard here.
Shannon says, Google says that the ingredients are onions and crab meat, vinegar, and oil dressing.
Oh, there we go. So there's no squid in it. That makes more sense. Yeah. It's really delicious. Oysters are really big here. As I said before, seafood is important, and lots of traditional French and Creole dishes. So yeah, we're walking down beside the Fort Conde Inn here, and you can see the addition that's on the back as well.
Are those building staples? Or are those just adornments, you know?
No, I think they do go all the way through the structure.
Oh, so there was earthquake issues here at one point, or?
Not earthquakes that I'm aware of, but we have a really soft geology. We're basically built on a swamp. We're basically built on sand and mud.
So it's shifting.
Right, exactly. And we're walking around on a cobblestone street here, and you can kind of see every once in a while places where the street has subsided a little bit. One of the nice things about cobblestones is they're easier to repair.
It feels like the city does an incredible job of preservation at the same time. You
Well-
know that clearly there's a lot of caretaking for it, which as guides it's hard not to appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. So when my wife and family and I moved here 11 years ago, one of the things that impressed us was how much they valued the historic built culture here and how well they preserved it. So yeah, they do have a very strong preservationist culture. Although sometimes there's a joke about it because there's such strong pro property owner laws that we sometimes refer to preservation by benign neglect. Meaning no one's ever going to reinforce that you take care of a property, but on the other hand, some property owners do just tend to ignore things and never tear them down either. So they kind of last but with a certain kind of, let's just call it decrepitude.
Yeah, that's expensive.
It is expensive. So we're just crossing out of this historic neighborhood and through an area that was a continuation of this community, but everything was torn down in the 1970s to make way for this Interstate 10 ramp. There was a beautiful neighborhood here and a historic neighborhood. Also, this neighborhood had its kind of wild and unruly pockets as well. And there was a little bit of lawlessness. In fact, there was a little area called Spanish Alley that was very popular with sailors. It was a place where they could find gambling, they could find prostitution, they could find plenty of food and drink as well. It was called Spanish Alley, and it stood just about in this spot. And if we went 1 block to the south from here along Royal Street, that's also a spot where originally the very first military submarine was built, the SS Hunley, no, the CSS Hunley. It was a Confederate submarine that was designed and built here in Mobile.
And I'm pretty sure that the replica of it sits outside of the Charleston Museum.
That's exactly right.
Today.
Leave it to a tour guide to pick up on those things. That's awesome.
Yeah, those guys ended up, it was a very simple machine.
Right.
It had like, almost like a lance, like a knight's lance that would come out the front.
That's exactly right.
And there was an explosive charge on the front. So part of the trick to the submarine was to ram into a ship to set off the charge without accidentally destroying the submarine itself in the explosion.
Exactly.
It didn't work out for the...
Not very well, no. And in fact, in the testing stages, they built a couple of different early versions of it here in Mobile, and I think at least one of them sank, drowning all the occupants. And I think there were maybe 3 different crews that sank and drowned.
There were, yeah, and in fact, they're memorialized, and I believe at least one set of the crew buried in Magnolia Cemetery in North Charleston.
Okay.
But we'll wait for Jim Gresham to fact check us and tell us whether it's true or not.
Well, now, so the very first test that they did, military test, was here in Mobile, and of course there was no Union enemy to test it on, but they put a barge out in the middle of the river, I think, or maybe farther down in the bay, and they launched the Hunley from really nearby here, in fact, probably right about on the spot. And they took it down to the mouth of the bay as a test. They got into some rough water down there. Basically, this was a big, giant, hollow cast iron cigar, just big enough to hold 8 guys. And guess what they discovered when they got underwater? Not much oxygen. And so they spent most of their time when they were underway with all the hatches wide open in a heavier than water craft that didn't have any way to, pump compressed air in or to flush out any water that would get in. So guess what? It sank a number of times. So here we are at Mobile's cruise terminal. So just in front of us would be where a cruise ship would dock, and we have had Carnival cruise ships that have docked here before, and we're expecting them to return. Of course, they haven't been here for the duration of COVID.
Right. What's your take as a local guide and entrepreneur on cruise ships? Are they good for the business, or are they not as good for the business? Yeah,
they're not very helpful to me. I understand that people enjoy taking tours. And I think local economies often imagine that they're going to benefit, and some of the restaurants do, but I haven't been able to find a good way to get passengers aboard who are about to embark on a cruise to also do a walking tour. Now, maybe there are some folks that can give me some suggestions about that, because it is a huge potential market.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds of people that are getting aboard a ship, and they're all here at the same time on the same day.
Yeah, I have the same opinion, actually. And from like the accommodation provider's perspective, and often restaurants as well, they say, well, look, they sleep on the ship, so I don't get anything from that. And they have all-you-can-eat buffets on the ship.
Right.
So like they stuff themselves, and I don't know if they're going to eat. And then even local stuff, you can't really buy stuff and bring it back on the ship because it's additional luggage.
Right.
And so it's hard to even like put money into the economy. The one thing that does feed the economy is the docking fees.
Right.
And then but that doesn't help small businesses. That helps the city. So.
Right, not so much.
Yeah.
So here we are at the waterfront here in Mobile.
Quite amazing.
This is actually Mobile River, and we're just about a half mile from the mouth of the river. The Mobile River flows north from Mobile Bay, connects up with several other rivers, including the Tom Bigby and the Alabama. And those waterways, along with many others, they drain the entire state. So almost all of the water in the state of Alabama is going to eventually flow past this point. If we look out across the water over to the right, just behind that big blue crane there, you'll see a long, low building with some ventilators spaced along the roof.
Yeah.
That's the original ADSCO, Alabama Dry Dock and Shipbuilding Company, where that was a shipyard during World War I and World War II. And we were building Liberty ships here during World War II. It was a big part of the war effort, and there was, of course, military contracts. We were cranking out these ships, which were basic troop ships and battleships. They could be easily and quickly built at a rate of 1 ship per month.
Oh my goodness.
They were being launched. And so lots of people were hired into Mobile. It really changed the character of the city because we needed so much labor. There was a housing shortage and people were moving into the city from all around the state. Even today we have shipyards in Mobile, including over to the left here, the Austell Corporation, which is building what are called littoral military ships. And we can see the odd looking bows of 2 of those ships sticking out of the hangars or the storage sheds where they're being built now. And then farther to the left, as you're panning over, you'll see a terminal that includes large dry materials like gravel and oil shale that can be stored in those large round tanks. As you go farther up, you'll see a small cruise ship. The Creole, I think, is the name of that, and we're going to walk up that way.
The steamship down there.
Yes, right, the paddle wheeler.
Paddle wheeler. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
the paddle wheeler. And
hi guys.
yeah, hey, how are you guys today? Now we're walking underneath the Maritime Museum, or just beside the Maritime Museum. Talks about the history of Mobile as a port city. It's a lot of fun. You can come in here and play port captain. You can operate a ship, and you can. Mobile is also historically the home of containerized shipping, where that concept was first developed. And of course, you know what I mean, the big, large steel shipping containers that are stacked aboard ships for international voyages. And but before that, every item that came into the port of Mobile, first of all, the bay itself wasn't deep enough for large ocean-going vessels. So they would dock at the south end of the bay. They would offload all of their cargo and passengers onto smaller, lighter vessels that drew less water, and they would come up into the port of Mobile. Those ships were called lighters because they were lighter than the large ships. And so that was the way. And there was a lot of handwork involved by longshoremen and stevedores to get all the cargo into the port of Mobile. Now, just up ahead of us, we're walking into a public space called Cooper Riverside Park. And all of the plaza that we're walking on now would not have been here for the first 100 years of our history. This was all swampy land, very muddy, and it was gradually filled in with different infill projects during the late 19th and early 20th century. So we got folks out here along the Mobile River enjoying their day. We got great weather today.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
For a nice little breeze. I thought the humidity was going to kill me, but
no. Trust me, the humidity is going to kill us all soon enough. But we're going to stop. We're going to pause right here and take a look at this statue. So this is one of the 2 brothers that founded Mobile. This is the elder brother. This is Pierre Moyne, Le Sieur d'Iberville. And he lived for only 4 years after the founding of Mobile, and he died of yellow fever. He actually didn't survive long enough for the settlement to be relocated to its current location. But his younger brother, Bienville, Jean-Baptiste, was his common name, and he took over and he finished the founding of Mobile as the original French capital. Yeah, but it makes a great statue. You also get an idea of how a French military man might have dressed in the early 1700s, and it's amazing just how fancy and how dandy he looks, right?
Yeah, he could easily be a vampire.
Yes, exactly.
From a movie we all know.
Right. And probably his costume would have been even more colorful than you might imagine.
Oh.
It wasn't unusual to have red coats, gold brocade trim, a crimson sash, and he actually has, I don't know if you can tell in the statue, but he actually has a lace handkerchief stuffed up one sleeve.
What's that handkerchief? I mean, it's a handkerchief for blowing your nose.
Yeah, and it was just part of the look of a well-dressed gentleman of the day.
Yeah.
So we're going to walk a little farther along Cooper Riverside Park here, and I think we have some more representations of the Six Flags over here. We won't talk about that again, but they're over here to the left, and you can see those.
How's the water quality here? Would you not want to be swimming in it?
Probably not.
Yeah.
For one thing, it's really silty. So the waters of the Mobile River include lots and lots of silt because we do have this large muddy sort of waterway just to our north. But it also is one of the richest and the most diverse ecosystems in the world. In fact, the area just north of Mobile Bay, which is called the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, is the second largest river delta in North America, and it's just teeming with fish and wildlife and game. And of course, you don't get any hint of that from looking around here at this industrial waterfront, but you can get out on a pontoon boat tour or on an excursion boat tour that takes you up into the delta, and it's really a lot of fun. Yep. So let's see, I want to point out a couple of other things, and let's head right over this way while I tell you a little more about the history of Mobile as a port city. And I've got a gentleman I want to introduce you to. This is Mr. Erwin Cooper over here on the park bench. Now, he doesn't talk a lot. That's because he's a bronze sculpture. But he's one of the business leaders, or he was one of the business leaders of Mobile in the waterfront. And his father founded a stevedoring company, and one of the stories that they tell about this gentleman's father, I'm going to sit down here next to Mr. Erwin.
Yeah, it's a mask-safe environment.
Yes, exactly. I think we're not going to pass anything back and forth. So yeah, his father was known to be a snappy dresser, but not terribly well educated. And what he was good at was picking out guys who would make a really good labor crew for unloading ships. He was also good at working out any disputes among the men because in spite of looking like he just stepped out of GQ magazine, he carried a pair of brass knuckles in his pocket. And he was known to climb down into the holds of ships and just kind of settle things the old-fashioned manly way. So yes, so that's a little bit about Erwin Cooper.
He looks tough.
And yeah, well, this guy's
brass knuckle part.
Right. Well, now that was actually his father. This was the college.
Sorry.
This was the son who was the college man.
I see.
So he's a little more sophisticated, you might say, Erwin Cooper.
Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Right?
That's right. That's right. So over here we have a historic marker that talks about one of the darkest chapters in the history of Mobile, and it ties into the waterfront because it happened right here in Mobile Bay, or at least part of the story happened in Mobile Bay. And that's the story of the last slave ship in America, the Clotilda. Now, the story of the Clotilda is that a rich businessman, a wealthy businessman named Timothy Mayer here in Mobile made a bet with some northern businessmen that in spite of the fact that international transatlantic slavery having been abolished since 1808, in the year 1860, he made a bet that he could send a ship to Africa, buy some native slaves, and bring them back to Mobile, which was totally against federal law. Long story short, they did manage to do that. They brought enslaved individuals from the country of Dahomey, and they under a captain who was actually doing something that was against international law. Now, as he was getting these slaves loaded aboard the ship in Dahomey, there was a British cruiser, a British ship that, and this is kind of interesting and I think ironic, we talked about this last night. The British had already abolished slavery. Now, they created British slavery laws that were especially inhumane, but by this time, by the 1860s, they had abolished slavery in not only, I think, in Britain, but I think in all of their colonies as well.
Yeah.
So the captain...
It was coming, I mean, the whole point was that, well, going
Yep.
into the Revolutionary War,
right.
It was that it was coming to the colonial, the colonies in North America as well.
Right.
There was a pressure that the British were you know, getting rid of slavery everywhere in places they controlled. So, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's great. And so in 1860, as they were taking these enslaved individuals that they were buying from one African tribe, and they were, you know, the individuals were from a tribe that they were warring with. They were being kept in pens on the beaches in Dahomey, and before they could take all of the people that they had actually paid for to put them aboard the Clotilda, this British ship comes along, and so the captain is afraid to stick around, and he leaves about 2/3 of the slaves that he'd paid for. So those folks were not enslaved, at least not by him, and he took off. To be caught in international waters or really anywhere would have meant the end of his ship, the end of his career, and probably the end of his freedom. He would have been rightfully put into jail. So they come back across. During the Middle Passage, surprisingly, all of those enslaved individuals survived that crossing of the Atlantic. Now, when they come to Mobile, they drop anchor down at the mouth of the bay, and they send word up to Timothy Mayer, who directs them not to sail up through the Mobile River because they might be spotted. And there were a couple of different ways that you could spot a slave ship. If you went aboard and you realized that there were chains or manacles, that would be one way. But another way was after they came across the ocean, you could smell a slave ship. And so if the wind was in the right direction and they came through here, everybody would know from the smell of having these poor souls, you know, imprisoned below decks for all of those months. So they sailed around the river out into the bay and north from here in using a different route. And if we look, well, we can't quite see it here because of the Perdido Queen, and but just to the north here was where the Clotilda ended up. Now, they were afraid that they were being chased. They were being chased. They had passed where they were supposed to have the ship inspected. They'd done this under cover of darkness. And so the captain panicked and was told to set the ship afire after he'd evacuated all of the enslaved Africans aboard. So he does that, burns the ship, sinks the ship near the mouth, or near where 12 Mile Island is now, just farther up the river. And just a couple of years ago, the remains of the Clotilda were actually discovered, and it was a huge discovery. It took a lot of research. The National Geographic Society was involved, as well as some local writers and scholars who did a lot of sort of boots on the ground research. Now, I skipped an important part of our story, and that is that after these enslaved individuals that were aboard the Clotilda were sold into slavery, they were then later emancipated at the end of the Civil War, and a large number of them were still together. So they actually formed an Afrocentric community where they preserved a lot of their traditions from Africa, and they even chose elders and leaders of the community based on their own African traditions. Today that community is called Plateau, Alabama. It's just north of downtown Alabama, and the nickname of it is Africa Town. One of the original survivors was the elder of the community. His name was Kazula, and he is buried in the cemetery today up in Plateau. And we're very excited because just recently plans for a visitor center and an interactive museum have been planned for Plateau, Alabama. So we're excited about that coming to fruition.
Awesome.
All right, so we're going to walk a little bit farther today, and we're headed over to our convention center and back into downtown Mobile. So go ahead, Chris.
It's worth mentioning Teague, who's such an incredible supporter of ours and the rest. Teague works in the travel industry as an agent, and he wanted to share his thoughts on working with cruise ships, with Carnival especially.
Oh, great!
And he said he's got only really positive things to say, and that it's been a really great relationship.
Okay.
And that he loves cruising, and that's part of it. Part of Teague's thing. So like, there's nothing but positive vibe from there, and it's great to see other sides of the industry having a different experience.
Definitely.
With the cruise stuff. So really grateful that Teague took the time to write that all out for us. There's a longer passage in the comments to explain that position.
Okay,
so,
great.
I respect that.
Yeah, well, thanks for your comments on that, Teague. And I'm actually looking forward to having Carnival come back to Mobile, and I'm going to kind of renew some efforts to make some inroads with that company.
Well, maybe Teague can be a connection there.
That would be great. Yep. I think one of the main challenges is to figure out a way to reach that audience before they come to Mobile through travel agents, maybe like Teague.
Yep.
So we're climbing some high stairs here because we're crossing a railroad track. Historically, of course, the railroad here was a connection to the port and to the rest of the country, the rest of the state. And this is one way to get across the train tracks. Now, right now, there's not a train below us, but you never know. We have a large coal terminal just south of where we are now, and so it's not unusual for the trains to come along. Oh, well, we're just seeing a little evidence of the working port here in Mobile. We're seeing a barge full of what looks like scrap metal that's headed south on the Mobile River to a scrap yard that's just a few miles from here. I actually take a weekly bike ride, and I'll be doing that tomorrow through that area, and I have a pretty good idea of where this is going because there's the largest junkyard I've ever seen that's just south of here, and it's right on the water.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this is very much a working port, and if we look again we're going to stand over the, and Chris, you can show the audience the tracks that are below that link Mobile, of course, to the rest of the country, and then a little farther south you can see some gantry cranes. Those are not for building construction; those are for loading and unloading ships.
And we're looking east. Now, or west?
South. We're actually looking south. Yeah. East would be to our left, west would be to our right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And
Teague mentions that it's going to connect me to some of the companies that you could speak with to arrange private tours, maybe some new relationships.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, Teague, for that.
And Rebecca and Shannon both reach out to say they're still watching, listening, and learning a lot. So thank you very much.
Oh, hey, Rebecca. Enjoyed meeting you last night. Yes, and I look forward to talking to you some more online. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna head over this way to the. We're gonna head over this way to cross Water Street. We have a pedestrian bridge that we can use, and I'm going to tell you a little more about this area. We're along the waterfront here in Mobile, Alabama, and this originally was all swampland. And Chris is being attacked by an insect. What was that?
That was a bumblebee. Teague says train tracks look very well managed, beautiful in an industrial way.
Yeah. Well, they have to be well managed and kept up because we have trains that run through here several times a day. So yeah, thanks for that. We haven't had passenger service here since I think the mid to late 90s, but we're really excited because Amtrak has made an announcement that they're going to bring passenger service back to Mobile. So you'll be able to take a train from Mobile to New Orleans or to Florida.
But it won't go up to Montgomery, I guess, huh?
I don't think so.
Jake was talking about one of the sad things from Montgomery was that they ended passenger service. there, and
Right.
they really lost a lot of that of business because of it.
Right, sure. All right, so it's getting a little noisy here, but we're crossing Water Street, and I'm masking up because we're meeting some other folks here close by. And so if you turn to the right, you can get a nice view of what Water Street looks like. Now, originally there would have been 2 city blocks full of warehouses and commercial buildings. This would have all been what was called on the maps low miry land. So basically swampland. Over in the distance, you can see a suspension bridge up on the horizon. That's called Cochrane Bridge. It's also nicknamed Africatown Bridge. So that is the approximate location of Africatown back in the back there. And let's see, these are the Alabama State Docks just beyond the convention center over to the right. Huge amounts of cargo get shipped in and out of the port there. So I want to pause right here because I did want to mention a couple of the larger buildings, but you know what? We can't really see them too well from here, so I'm going to wait just a little bit longer. So we are crossing Water Street and we're headed for Royal Street, which is kind of where we started our tour, isn't it?
Yeah.
We were on Royal Street right over at Mardi Gras Park. We're going to walk on Royal Street a little bit more and tell a few more stories about the history of Mobile. So some of the cargoes that were really important to the history of Mobile, cotton. During that early American period, about a little less than half of the cotton produced in the United States was actually shipped out through the port of Mobile.
We're going to have a signal issue, I imagine, right now. Are you looking at elevator?
I'm thinking about the staircase, and we can stay outside.
Yeah. Let's cruise it only because
right.
you can see that the structure here is pretty strong, it's pretty thick, and it might be. Sorry for running you guys down this. I don't want to lose the feed.
One more. Okay. We're going to go out right here. I'll grab the door. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Thank you. All right. And I'm hoping we don't lose the signal, guys. Sorry about this. Things that you don't think about when you're doing a physical tour, but you have to when you're doing a digital tour, right?
Exactly. This is all part of the learning lesson for us.
That's right. That's right.
As we go through it and experiment. But we found that if we run through spaces, we can often kind of like jump from tower to tower.
Okay, gotcha. So we're going to walk very briefly through the downstairs lobby of the Renaissance Hotel, Riverview Hotel here, and we'll be out into a public plaza right here. We still have our signal?
Shannon, thank you. You're amazing. Shannon's like our little like our Sherpa.
Okay.
Like our stream Sherpa.
Uh-huh.
She's always so great to let us know where the volume's there or the problem or whatnot. And I just can't tell you how helpful that is.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Shannon.
When you're doing like a real tour, that the person on the tour who's nodding to let you know, I get it. Right,
exactly.
And that helps a ton.
Yeah, that kind of feedback is always helpful.
Shannon says, we made it. All right, back to the tour, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. So we're back on Royal Street, and we're going to take a few steps in this direction to talk about street names and to talk about Mardi Gras again. So we're out on Royal Street, and you'll remember that I told you there's a Royal Street in New Orleans. Chris is going to be there maybe on Royal Street tomorrow. He'll be in New Orleans tomorrow, tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, on the day of a Mardi Gras parade, we would be seeing floats going up and down the street. Now, the street that's directly across from us is called Conde Street. It's one of the original streets. What's that?
I've heard of that in New Orleans as well, I think.
Yes, there is one in New Orleans as well. And it's the only street that wasn't actually surveyed when the city was first laid out by the French. The French were really serious about you know, planning and engineering and that sort of thing. So all of our oldest streets are kind of perfectly on the grid, except for Conde, and Conde kind of meanders back and forth because it was originally a Native American footpath. And if we step just a little to the left, you might be able to see over the roof of this vehicle, you see a cross in the distance. So that's actually part of the cathedral that I think Chris was taking you through, what, about an hour ago? Something like that.
Yeah.
But originally, before that cathedral was built in the early 1700s, there was a council house, a council house where local tribesmen would come and negotiate treaties with the French. And they would walk up Conde Street. And so that's why you can see a bend up there where you can see the strollers walking past. All of the rest of the streets in Mobile are straight as an arrow, but Conde is a little bit crooked.
Right. Well, it gives people a sense of where we were earlier on today.
Yes, exactly. Right. And so we're gonna turn and walk back the way that we came and talk a little bit more about the waterfront and Royal Street. But hey, I just want to thank everybody in our audience of the live stream for joining us here. We are in Mobile, Alabama. Mobile is the oldest city in Alabama, founded in 1702, and the original capital of French Louisiana.
Exactly, and it's worth also just making a mention of it, guys. You'll see a donation link in the description of the video, it's as easy as neweuropetours.eu/donate, well, Todd's not going to say it for himself. I'm going to say it as well, that your donations are appreciated.
Very much appreciated, guys.
And times right now.
Absolutely. It's really tough for tour guides right now. We're fortunate in the South in that our tourism industry is starting to reopen, but we've gone for months without one, and it's been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah. You can also find links to, of course, Todd's company, so that way when you are coming to Mobile, which is open for business, you'll be able to get on a tour and book in.
Absolutely, yeah. The company name is Secret History Tours, and we offer a wide array of tour products, and we want to show you guys a great time when you visit the city of Mobile.
As we've been walking around earlier on today, we talked to some locals, and I mentioned you, and they're like, oh yeah, I know him. Like, I know that guy. I've seen his stuff.
Right.
So
right.
There's
well,
clearly a local seal of approval.
Well, that's great to know.
Thank you for publishing the donate link there as well. Awesome. It's in the chat.
Oh, great. Well, thanks so much. So let's see. I'm going to try to cross the street a little bit and talk about a bit of a controversial issue, and that's the removal of civil. So the problem is we're also having a removal of much of our street surface. We've got construction going on.
It does seem like that pedestal is noticeably empty.
That's right. The pedestal, as Americans would call it, or the plinth, I think is what the British call it, is sitting empty, and I'm going to tell you why in just a couple minutes. We need to cross the street right now, Chris?
Yeah.
Straight over. And right over this way. And I'm going to check some notes real quick, so bear with me.
Oh, no worries. How are you feeling on time? What do you think what are we running?
So it's about 2 o'clock, 2:02 on the nose. And we have done most of our tour now. So if you're feeling like you need to bring things to a close, we can do this.
Well, I have two things to say to that. One, I do have to get to Jason Goodenough's tour.
Yes, that's right.
Which I hope people will join and join Jason and me as we do a little bit of a food stroll around New Orleans Garden District. But also looking at the map and knowing that my next destination after New Orleans is going to bring me up towards Memphis, I'm thinking that I've been so surprised by Mobile. I had not expected this. I did not see it coming, and it's why it's actually so appropriate that your business is called Secret History.
Secret History,
because actually, I think Mobile is a little bit of a secret.
Yeah, I mean, we are a pretty well-kept secret. We're about we're in between New Orleans and Florida, and a lot of people just stop here for lunch and continue on down I-10.
Which is a huge mistake.
Yeah, I would invite people to spend the night here to get to know this beautiful historic city a little bit more. It's a friendly place. It's a very affordable place too.
Sorry guys, hold on a second. Having a technical issue on the gimbal.
Gimbal's going a little nutso. Okay.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. If I tug a little bit and I'm not paying attention.
Okay.
Bear with me.
There we go.
We're back in business.
This is a great device here, this handheld gimbal. I wish you guys could see it. So we're looking at this empty mall, but originally one of the Civil War heroes of Mobile stood atop that pedestal. His name was Raphael Semmes. And yeah, let's see if we can get over a little closer.
Yeah. Seems like the construction guys are going to be okay with it.
Right. Now, Raphael Semmes actually, so I started doing some research about him when I first started doing walking tours. And I was surprised at the things that I learned, because even though he's considered a hero here in Mobile, and he was he captained a boat that was called the Alabama, the Confederate ship Alabama. He never actually fought in American waters. He never actually defended Mobile. And what he really was a privateer who sank U.S. vessels in foreign ports mostly. So I was really kind of surprised to hear that. Now, the statue was removed just within the past year, and it's in storage, and my understanding is that it's going to be put out in an exhibit that'll recontextualize that original sculpture and tell more of the story of the figure behind it and how it came to be placed here. You'll also notice that the date that it was erected isn't just after the Civil War. Like many Civil War statues, this was erected in the early 20th century, around 1900, and the statue was donated by the Daughters of the Confederacy. And of course, removing these statues, especially in the South, it's a controversial issue, but I think it's important that we celebrate things that we still support and believe in today. And Confederate soldiers that supported slavery, of course, I don't agree with that, and I don't think many Southerners would. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that what we should not do is erase history or sanitize history as if this never happened. So I'm hoping that what happens with the statue is it gets presented again in a museum exhibit where it's not as much of a public heroic kind of space, but it gets explained and contextualized in a way that's more helpful for folks.
High five to that.
Yes.
Because after the fall of communism across Europe, a lot of those old communist statues, well, there was a question as what to do with them. They were taken down, and they were actually taken often and put into statue parks, where they removed off of a glorification pedestal in the center of the city and put into a place where people could go and understand it in context, what the history of it is, and explain what that statue was, when it was removed, why it was removed, and not destroyed, not forgotten. Because actually, if you don't engage with the history, then you really run the risk of let it repeat itself.
That's
without
right.
understanding it.
That's exactly right, Chris. Yeah.
I really support that.
Yeah. Well, so this is not where I normally would finish my tour in the middle of a construction site like this, but you know what? Well, you know what? I'm going to tell one more story.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say we cross over if you want.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. We'll head back over to Mardi Gras Park.
Also takes us away from the traffic.
Right.
While we have you folks here, quick question about firemen.
Yes.
Do you guys see firemen as being local heroes, or do you have a positive or a negative opinion of firemen? I guess
For me or for them?
No, them.
Okay.
I'm curious with the crowd, because we talked about fireman tours.
Right, we did. Yes. So yeah, and just a little background. Mobile happens to have several historic volunteer 19th century fire hall structures that still exist, And so I was thinking of designing a tour around the idea of firefighting and volunteer fire halls, and some more of our history as well. But I think it would make a really interesting, engaging walking tour, and we just wonder what people think of that, or how you see firemen generally.
Michaela also just donated to you.
Oh, Michaela, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you so much. That's very generous. I definitely appreciate that. So we're headed over to a large church here, and this is the oldest standing church here in Mobile, and we're kind of in the glaring sun right now, so we're going to get a little closer if we can. And this will be our last stop for today, because I know Chris has got to hop in the car and head over to New Orleans, right?
Exactly. But what I was going to say before is I'm definitely really thinking that maybe on Monday towards St. Louis, maybe we could meet up again. Maybe not with the group here, but you and me could meet up on Monday or Tuesday, depending upon availability.
Yeah, I would love that.
Maybe even Biloxi for Taranto's crawfish.
Oh man, that sounds great. That sounds great. Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll talk some more once we're off of the live stream, and we'll
off the hot mic.
Yeah, hopefully we can make that happen.
Like, I feel I can say on behalf of you guys who are listening right now, you can't just give Mobile 1.5 days or 1 day. It needs longer. It demands longer, and I'm feeling right now like I just can't. I don't want to leave right now because there's still so much to see and experience.
Right,
here.
right.
So
yeah, and this is a charming, smaller city with just under 200,000 people. It's very walkable, very safe, and people really enjoy it.
Everyone's been super friendly
and
hospitable on the street.
Oh, I'm glad to know that. Right.
Oh gosh, just nothing but positive things.
Yeah. So, so this is Christ Church Cathedral. This isn't the first church that was built in Mobile, because as we talked about, Mobile was established by Catholics, and this is a Protestant church. But this is the oldest surviving structure. And so this is a Greek Revival building. And interesting story, in 1906 that we had a huge hurricane, and in 1906 the steeple up at the top blew off, and that was the original steeple. It crashed through the roof, destroyed the church, and it took years to really rebuild. So the members of the congregation chose not to rebuild that the steeple, but to repair the roof. And they've got some beautiful Tiffany stained glass windows that you can't see from this side, but they're visible from the I guess that would be the south side of the building. They rebuilt everything but the steeple until about 3 years ago, and they finally were able to rebuild the steeple. Now it's built out of thin sheet metal, so if it comes down in another hurricane, at least it won't destroy the roof of the church.
The building's giving me a strong vampire vibe right now, I have to be honest with you.
Definitely.
It doesn't look like it's operational, really. It almost looks kind of, it's not decrepit, it just looks...
Yeah, it's got a little age to it. Yeah. This is one of the things you see on older buildings in New Orleans, I think, and in Mobile, is because of our humidity. A lot of our buildings do look a little rough, or a little. It takes a lot to keep these buildings up. But let me just compliment the members of the Christ Church Cathedral, because this is a thriving and active congregation. Okay. Yeah, they're having weddings here, and now keep in mind though that we're at the end of our COVID year, so I'm not sure whether this congregation has actually been actively worshiping in the space.
Right. That's why it looks like it's not an active.
Yeah, maybe. And it might need a little bit of a scrub up or a dusting off or something. But it is a beautiful historic church.
We're also close to. We can see we're close to the highway over here still.
Right.
Which means you're always going to get a little bit more pollution.
That's right.
To the immediate area. So.
Right, and just over here is where the reproduction of our Fort Conde is, the original Colonial fort.
Right.
The rooftop that you see in the distance, we visited that just earlier. That was originally the jail for the city, and it's called the Conde Charlotte Museum. It's a house museum now. And in the space between the fort and Church Street here, just beyond where those cars are parked, there is an interstate ramp that's going down into a tunnel.
Right.
So that's the Wallace Tunnel that takes all the traffic out to I-10. So, so that's just a brief walk around here in the city of Mobile. There's so many more stories to tell. This was just kind of a general overview of our city. There's so many stories about Mobile is a colonial city, about the natural habitat here of the Mobile-Tensaw Delta. Yep. And we also have, Civil War stories. This was the last southern city to fall in the Civil War. We have a beautiful, well-preserved downtown and just terrific food and wonderful people. So thank you all for joining me here in Mobile, Alabama. And thanks, Chris, so much for doing this live stream.
Oh gosh, it's been a real pleasure, and I'm really sorry about screwing up the times and stealing an hour.
So
I could not do justice to this great city as I was walking around, and I'm so glad that you jumped in and saved the day.
Well, I was happy to do it, yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, then, if you'll do me the great honor, if you see in the top right-hand corner, there's that little end button.
Right.
If you press that, we'll end the stream.
Sounds good, Chris. Take care, everybody.
See you guys soon. See you in a couple hours from New Orleans. Oh, almost. Hold on a second. There it is. Oh, it's grab it. It's a little tricky.